Now I would request the Director of IIST Shibpur, Professor Ajay Kumar Ray, to address the gathering.
Very good afternoon to all of you. We are indeed very happy that today we have with us Padma Shri Shekhar Basu to deliver the first Visvesvaraya Memorial Lecture in our institute. Padma Shri Basu, he came in the morning today, and the whole day he was involved first in inaugurating a very important task force meeting, a very important workshop on a very important topic on nuclear energy, nuclear science and technology and its application. And then we had very detailed discussions on collaborations and initiating some new programs in the arena of applied nuclear science and technology in our institution. And now he will be delivering the lecture. So throughout the day he was very busy. And as you know that as Professor Aparna Deghosh, she just mentioned that these lecture series that we have initiated in this institute, these are extremely important lecture series, and these are meant to widen the horizon of your thoughts. And it's extremely important that you should know these great personalities. And then we have invited very eminent persons for delivering each of these lecture series lectures in our institute. And Visvesvaraya, naturally being the second oldest engineering institution in this country. So Visvesvaraya was born in 1860 and 60 or 61 in 60. Yes, and he died in 1962. And 1860 means 4 years after our institute was born. And throughout his life, as Professor Aparna Deghosh mentioned, that she had not only worked very extensively for water resource management in our country, because during the British India there used to be a lot of famines throughout 19th century and also large part of 20th century. In British India, the country had witnessed a large number of famines throughout the country, and thousands of people had died in those famines. It was primarily because of the fact that there was no irrigation, there was no water systems management. And water is such an important thing that in this institution also we have started a center for advanced research on diverse aspects of water. And so Visvesvaraya was a person, even as a small child in his school days, in his college days, he had himself witnessed these famines. And he knew the causes of the famine, because the British people, they wanted to very thinly distribute whatever water resource was available throughout the country. And at one end, as it happens, for example, you will find that there are water disputes still now going on, Kaveri water dispute. It is interstate water dispute. Between India and Bangladesh also, from West Bengal to Bangladesh, a lot of water dispute is going on. It is because of the fact that water is flowing from one place to another place, and then the one who is at the head end, that particular point, some of the people may take advantage. But then it's very interesting that those who are at the tail end of the entire canals, the canals were so distributed that those people were not getting any water. So it was Visvesvaraya who had first given the complete uniform distribution of the water system in the country. And whatever he had done, that is still used as a Deccan model. And this is something which he had done in 1899. 1899 model of Visvesvaraya is still used throughout southern India. and also in large parts of India. And as Professor Deghosh very rightly she mentioned about not only in engineering aspects, but also his contributions in industries, and most importantly in spread of education, and mainly in technical education. When the Maharaja of Mysore had invited Visvesvaraya to be the chief engineer in Mysore state, so the first thing that Visvesvaraya wanted to know that whether Maharaja of Mysore had anything in his mind about spreading of technical education, because he knew that until and unless science and technology can be expanded inside the country, nothing can be achieved. And when the Maharaja had agreed, and he was the first to start a lot of institutions, and mainly in the area of engineering and technology. He also had a lot of contributions in Pune, from where he had his degree, and he is one of the outstanding personalities who had passed out from Pune, not only from his own state of Karnataka, but also in Maharashtra. He had contributed a lot. We are very happy to honor in memory of Visvesvaraya, and we are very happy that today we have Padma Shri Shekhar Basu to deliver the first Visvesvaraya Memorial Lecture. I am sure that all of us will be quite enlightened, because Professor Basu is an outstanding exponent of energy. Like water, energy is one of the major issues throughout the globe, and in particular in India. So he will be speaking on the diverse aspects of renewable energy. Maybe since he has been at the helm of affairs so far as the nuclear energy in the country is concerned, and also the diverse aspects of nuclear science and technology, he will concentrate on these two aspects. With these few words, I once again welcome Professor Padma Shri Shekhar Basu to our institution. Thank you.
About the speaker of today's lecture. Dr. Shekhar Basu, a renowned nuclear scientist, is currently the director of Bhabha Atomic Research Center. He has earlier worked as the project director of the Nuclear Submarine Program and as the chief executive of the Nuclear Recycle Board at BARC. Dr. Basu is an engineer of exceptional ability who has played a lead role in multiple areas of nuclear science and engineering, and is a major contributor in establishing India as a leader in the nuclear field. Dr. Basu, born on 20th September 1952, did his schooling from Baliganj Government School, Kolkata, and graduated in mechanical engineering from VJTI, University of Mumbai in 1974. After a year at the BARC Training School, he joined the Reactor Engineering Division of BARC in 1975. He started his career by designing fuel for the boiling water reactor, which proved to be excellent in reactor performance. He then developed the nuclear submarine propulsion plant and built the land-based prototype at Kalpakam from scratch. He continues to guide the Indian nuclear propulsion program for the sea-going versions. Since 2000, he has been responsible for the nuclear recycle plants at Tarapur and Kalpakam, which are performing to international standards. As Director BARC, Dr. Basu has taken special initiatives in the fields of nuclear agriculture, food preservation, and nuclear medicine. While pursuing basic research in the field of nuclear science and engineering, he is also working towards the expansion of enrichment and strategic programs. He represented India in arrangements and procedures with the US government for reprocessing of US hypothecated fuel, and he has chaired the International Committee for the design review of 3 modules of the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. He has several publications to his credit in national and international journals. He has been conferred several awards, and these include Indian Nuclear Society Award 2002, DAE Awards in 2006 and 2007. He is also a fellow of the Indian National Academy of Engineers and of the Indian Society for Non-Destructive Testing. Jadavpur University awarded him with D.Litt degree honoris causa in 2013. He was awarded Padma Shri by the Government of India in 2014. So we now invite Padma Shri Shekhar Basu to deliver the Vishveshwaraya Memorial Oration. Sir.
I have one. How much time is allotted? 1 hour. 1 hour. No, I think we have started late. That's why. Okay, good afternoon. And see, I am talking for the second time in the day, which I am anyway not used to, and I am not used to very long lecture. But when I asked our Professor Saab, he said that no, lecture is about hour duration, so we have to prepare that one. So I am doing a very difficult job, which as far as I am concerned. Then there is another difficulty, or whether it is difficulty or good point that you have to yourself decide. See, after talking after lunch has its advantages and disadvantages. Because a disadvantage is that most of the people are supposed to sleep off after a good lunch. But at the same time, advantage is that then you can get away by telling anything, so nobody bothers. Then the other side of the story is, which is still more important. If I have also had a very good lunch, courtesy Professor Ray, and that means there is a good probability I may also sleep off. Please wake me up in that case. So I am going to talk on, as a director, but this is the only thing I can probably talk to, is something which has got to do with nuclear. And these words are important: nuclear energy, sustainable and green. Let us see, in the course of this 1 hour, I am going to deliberate on this only. It is a very beautiful picture of the universe, you all know, and some of you, I have picked up from internet only, and some of you must be knowing. The next one is still more beautiful. It is a sunset, view of the sunset, and of course not from on the bank of Ganga in front of you. Maybe Ganges view is still more beautiful, but beauty is not the thing which I am going to tell you about. Then this is the planet, Earth, and you will see India very prominently over there. But what is common about it? Okay, common is that in terms of time scale, this universe was formed 14 billion years ago, and then the solar system came 10 billion years later, and the Earth came around, planet Earth came around the same time, maybe take a few million years here and there. But the common factor is all of them radiate radiation. This fact you cannot deny. And of course, universe, you see so much of lights coming, solar system, you see so much of lights coming, but you may be wondering where from Earth is giving us radiation. Earth has in it uranium-238, thorium-232, then potassium-40, then radium and all other things which they give you a lot of radiation. But more important, that comparatively recently it has been found that we get anti-neutrinos from the center of the Earth. What does it mean? That means some nuclear reaction is going inside the center of the Earth. And one of the hypotheses is that there is a core of uranium which is about 8 kilometers in diameter, which is at the center of the Earth. Nuclear reaction is continuing, and you are getting
heat and radiation out of it. And again, another number I can talk about is that Earth, whatever radiation it receives from sun, it emits double that radiation. Where from it is coming? Again, it is coming from radiation only in this form. So radiation is something you cannot avoid. But this is what I am not talking about this topic, but something more. Then, in the time scale, humans evolved 2 billion years later, and environment, everything was fine about this environment till 200 years ago, when our friend James Watt, or our scientist, our engineer James Watt, means I think you have to say that he is the topmost engineer because the industrial revolution started with his discovery. So these 200 years we have done everything that is possible, of course slowly, to pollute the air, to contribute to global warming, and this has started challenging our own existence. So it is much more important than what we can think of. But at the same time, when all this is happening, nature has given us an option to use nuclear reaction to create, which was a nuclear reaction which is used to create the universe. Same nuclear reaction can be used to form sustainable green energy option. So nuclear reaction, I am not taking nuclear energy, nuclear reaction would obviously mean solar and nuclear power, which we talked about. Then quickly, what is the tool that is available with us to use this nuclear reaction or nuclear energy? One is, of course, you burn uranium in a reactor, we will go into the more of it, but in our country we have got very little uranium by the standard of energy, the demand that is there for us, which is about 2 lakh tons, and out of that about 1 lakh ton will be useful. And this 1 lakh ton of uranium can give only about 10,000 megawatt electrical power capacity, which is going to last for about 60 years. Every plant that we make will last for 60 years. What happened? But probably one fortunate thing is going to happen for us, which we are seeing it happening. This area, this is a Kadapa basin, one area Tumlapalli. There is a strip of this red point as show that is, which is about 15 kilometers wide and 106 kilometer length, and having very low weight of uranium, but probably it is export, this same number will go to 15 lakh tons. And that would mean out of that, if we only are able to use even 5 lakh ton of uranium, then we cannot say we are a uranium starving country. But as of today, this has not happened, and there are many reasons for, even if it is there in your land, you are not able to explore. Many reasons happen, including political reasons. But this shows some of the things that our friends in Atomic Mineral Division do to explore, including helical surface and all those things. I will skip this. Then they have mines at 3 places, all these areas that are being shown, and there are 3 places where they process, and this goes to the place known as nuclear fuel complex. As a matter of fact, I know that at least 2 persons mentioned to me about Dr. Chaitanya Ganguly. Chaitanya Ganguly sir was chief executive of this place for quite some time. Now here what happens is that this uranium corporation, they take out the uranium, which is in U3O8 form, it is converted to UO2 powder, then it becomes pellet, that is by powder metallurgy process, and then it is scanned in this type of tubes, which is made up of zircaloy, and then these pellets are put into that and sealed. This is what we call fuel assembly. And obviously to make this, we have to do one more thing, is to make these cladding tubes in which these pellets will go. So to do that, we start with zircon sand, which is there in Indian soil. From that it goes to zirconium oxide, zirconium spore, zirconium alloy, and fuel tube components. Finally it comes out of this. And that's how it makes the fuel assembly. This shows some of the pictures of this particular plant, nuclear fuel complex. Maybe if some of you are interested, you can always tell us. We can arrange a visit into this place. And by the way, whatever I am showing you, if anybody is interested, particularly my student friends, you are always welcome. Come in a group and you can always see that. Then let me take a deviation. So you know now what is the way to explore or exploit the process of radiation to get energy. Whether it is green or sustainable or not, that question will answer at a later point of time. But we all know and we all agree that we are scared of radiation. But why? See, again, all of you know that world started, universe was formed with a Big Bang. That is as far as today's science is concerned, they tell us that way. And this Big Bang has happened, and we are not unhappy about it. Because anyway, it happened long back, so when we are not there, and anyway, it has not caused any damage that we can think of. I take a further diversion here. This Big Bang, it is just to tell you that how Indian science is progressing, because half of you are, at least part of you are science students. See, we have a telescope, which is Mace telescope. This is 21-meter diameter, coming up at a place which known as Ladakh, Hanle, where the temperature is minus 40 degrees C, absolutely no humidity, and always sky is clear. So that is the best place to receive radiation. What happens is that those radiation coming from 14 billion light years away, that means which are formed at the time of this formation of the universe, they reach the Earth's atmosphere, and then they convert it into what is called light flashes or Cherenkov radiation, and that is what is picked up by this, and then data is analyzed. My reason for mentioning this, particularly for my friends from physics, is that this is the biggest telescope in the northern hemisphere, and such things normally lead to, when you have such big facilities, lead to a lot of discoveries. And 2017 this will be operational, and by then I think we can expect a lot of, you will find a lot of Indian scientists discovering a lot of things from those era when the universe was formed, which we see many times these days. Now again I come back to my topic. But then why you are scared of radiation? Reason is simple, that you came to know, or humans came to know about radiation through these two Big Bangs. One at Nagasaki, another one at Hiroshima. That is why we are scared of it, and we have all reasons to be, we are right about being scared of it. But if you know the true story, then actually this has to be analyzed and seen in a different way. So we should be scared of atomic bombs, but there is no need to be scared about radiation. And while you appreciate that, easiest way to appreciate that is that all energy around us is originating from nuclear reaction. Somebody will tell wind energy coming from where, or fossil fuel coming from, you think over, everything is originating is nuclear reaction. So what is wrong about nuclear reaction? This is only giving us energy. We get radiation from sun, we get radiation from earth, we get radiation from home as well as this auditorium, and we also get radiation from medical checkup, air travel, etc. So this gives you some number. The total amount of radiation received by one average human being who is not a radiation worker or doesn't stay in the radioactive area is of the order of 2.4 millisieverts per year. And out of that, 1.4 millisieverts come from just the air he breathes. You cannot stop breathing air, so you are going to get this much. You have to live on the surface of Earth, so you are going to get this much radiation. You have to eat, and you will get this much of radiation. And similarly, all other sources. Now, next slide you have a look. See, if you are going to take a X-ray, simple X-ray, you will get 0.5 millisieverts. If you have traveled about 5,000 kilometers, that means, say, Calcutta, Bombay and back, I am going to get this much radiation by the time I reach back Bombay, just because of this travel. And if you live just at the edge of a nuclear plant, you are going to get 0.01 type of number. So why you are scared? There is nothing to be scared. Or why those who say they are scared, why they are scared? Now then there is one more finding, and this is maybe it's going to become more accepted maybe 5 years from now. We are doing a lot of research in this. See, Kerala, this part, one edge about 400 kilometers, this edge has got lot of radioactive material in terms of thorium, and that gives you lot of radiation. Those people who live there, who have been living for hundreds of years over there, they get much more radiation than what you will be giving, which I told you is about 2.4 millisieverts. So blood samples from them have been taken, and they have been irradiated to a very high level of dose. And then we see after that irradiation how much DNA recovery is there, how fast DNA is recovering. So that finding is that something of this type. That if you have in the range of you are living in this high radiation area, your DNA repair takes this much time. Whereas if you are in the lower level of radiation area, it takes more time. That means it is indicating that probably it will be well established in few years from now that if you have been exposed to irradiation, you are going to recover from irradiation damage much faster than if you have not been. Then all that I told you, now let us come to the main body of the lecture that I am going to take, is the whatever we have talked so far is on the what is called front end of fuel cycle. We are now getting into the main body of that fuel cycle, which is irradiation in reactor. But when you go to irradiation of reactor, it is quite a complex process because the nature has created this complexity. Nature has given us only one fissile material, which is uranium-235. And uranium-235, only 0.7% comes in whatever uranium resource we get. That means if rest uranium-238 is about 99.3%. That means the fissile material actual availability is very little. And this uranium-238 is known as fertile material. Uranium-238 converts itself into a fissile material, plutonium-239, after absorbing one neutron in a nuclear reactor. Every nuclear fission, that is, you bombard a uranium-235 atom with a neutron, it will give 2 neutrons. And one of the neutron will go on to produce plutonium-239, other one will go to produce next fission, and half of it will get absorbed in the structural material. So that means you are going on producing, as you are burning some uranium, you are also going on producing plutonium-239. And this is what is a man-made fissile material on the surface of Earth. Then we have a process known as reprocessing, which I have been working for quite some time on this. And this plutonium-239 is taken out from this spent fuel, and this goes back into reactor as the fuel for the next phase. And in the first phase, we extract energy from uranium-235 and produce plutonium-239 for use in the second phase. And just to give you an idea, the type of reactors PHWR that we use, there we have we produce about every neutron we burn, we get about 0.8 amount of plutonium-239. You see the same story given in photograph form. That is, this is a pressurized water reactor. This is probably the Rajasthan one. And we call them thermal reactor because the neutrons are in the thermal range. It is about 0.28 eV. And then here in thermal reactors you put natural uranium, it gets converted into depleted uranium, that is uranium-235 is burnt up, and also it produces plutonium. It goes to the next phase. And same thing happens in light water reactor. That is, two types of thermal reactors are there. Light water reactor, I will talk about it at a little later stage. Let me not confuse here. Then this PHWR, which is as of today, which is our mainstay, this is a vessel in which heavy water is there, and there are tubes, pressure tubes, in which the fuel assemblies are kept, which you saw earlier. And there are two fueling machines which pushes fuel from one side, other side is received it, and new fuel is again pushed in over there. So this is what is known as on-power refueling. And heavy water is again passing through this, going to the steam generator, where it produces steam for to be used in turbine, and then again it recirculates. This is basically MTHWR. I will not go into more of this. But see, in terms of technology, where do we stand? And see, our reactors work at about 82% capacity factor, and then generation is increasing continuously, and this will be more clear at a later date. And this is among the best in the world. We have our reactors which have operated. When these reactors, you just start it and then forget it. No, you cannot forget it, but it continues to operate, and it will continue to operate for 60 years. No, there is no other system which can compare with this. And we have, as I was telling, we are doing very well. See, we have one reactor which is 765 days it has operated continuously, and we had to stop it because safety committee wanted us to stop it. They didn't allow us to continue further, where there is a rule that after about 2 years of operation you have to take it up for inspection. And this is again the best in the world, although it is written as second highest, but second highest means the other one has happened 40 years back. Today, one will not be allowed to operate a reactor in this type of condition. So this is the best in the world as of today. This shows some of the components that are there. This is the fueling machine that is being talked about. And as a matter of fact, in this type of reactors, fueling machine is the most complex component. Then let us go to second phase. Second phase is slightly different. We make fast reactors using leftover uranium-238 and plutonium-239 for the first phase. But there is another beauty of this system. Fast reactor produce the required amount of energy and also produce more plutonium-239 than they consume. It means that if you have consumed one plutonium atom to produce the energy that this reactor is supposed to produce, you will get back 1.5 times, 1.3 times, 1.2 times, some such number. That is much more than what you have consumed. So what it means that you put back this plutonium back into the reactor to continue the operation, and also take out the extra plutonium and make a new reactor after you have been able to fill it up. We call that doubling time. And why it happens? Why more amount of neutrons, more amount of plutonium-239 is produced here? Because here the neutron is of higher energy, and that is why you call it fast reactor. First is faster velocity of neutrons. Again, this same figure in a pictorial form. This is PHWR, and this is the PFBR, prototype fast breeder reactor, which is under construction at Alpha. And then, as we said, the thermal reactor, we have seen this, the plutonium is going into fast breeder reactor. Again, plutonium comes out and goes back. Extra plutonium will go to another reactor, and also it is possible to put some thorium into that and produce uranium-233. This we are not going to do it now. Towards the end of the program, when this, and you will see how long it will last. Towards the end of the program, we will see that when exactly these thorium reactors are to be introduced. Because this is one question we are quite often asked, that India is having so much of thorium, why you are not using it? The answer to that is in the next slide. But before that, this is how the PFBR looks like in the night, quite beautiful. Then PFBR is slightly different. There is a vessel Of course, there are supporting other vessels outside as protection, and this whole thing is filled with sodium. Sodium is at about 500 plus degrees C, say 550 degrees C, and then this is pumped in the upward flowing, making it flow. This is the core, and then it goes to the steam generator. Of course, this is not steam generator; it is a heat exchanger, where the sodium to sodium heat transfer takes place, and then there is another heat exchanger through which finally steam is produced. And this produces steam at a much higher temperature because the basic PhD temperature itself is about 500 degrees C. This is how a first reactor fuel actually looks like. These are the fuel pits, and this is again filled with plutonium, uranium fuel. This shows some of the components over there. Now let us go to third phase. We convert another fissile material, thorium-232, into fissile material uranium-233. That is one thorium-232 atom. It absorbs one neutron, and then after 2 beta decays, it becomes uranium-233, which is a fissile material, again a man-made fissile material. And third phase of reactors are started with plutonium-239 as fissile material, or uranium-233 produced in second phase of reactor by making 232 absorb one neutron. And this is what exactly will happen. This will probably you will come to know about 50 years from now, when you start introducing the thorium reactor, which is required not required now. Uranium-233 and thorium-232 is separated from waste material by reprocessing of spent fuel in this phase also. So this is PHWR you have seen, this is prototype Pulp-Heated reactor you have seen, and then this reactor we have not made it yet, but we are in the process of, site selection has been completed, and maybe in a year or so we will start construction of this. And this is again on the same cycle. First it has gone to thermal reactor, plutonium and uranium has come out, it has gone into first reactor, plutonium has been recycled, and then probably uranium-233 has been taken out, and it has gone to the third cycle, and it is going on in that way. And this advanced heavy water reactor, which I talked to you, this will be using about 65 thorium fuel, where 65% of the fuel will be power will be produced from thorium. This will have 108 days of period of cooling, that is, it can tolerate no electric supply or no water supply from outside. You know about that Fukushima and what has happened. So it is a very long time it can withstand, remain intact without getting into any problem on its own. Then life, which I was talking about 60 years, here the life, operational life will be about 100 years. And then other features are there. This will be a 300 megawatt reactor. Okay, this goes into describe the system, which I can see. Now then let us see what is the status of nuclear power as of today in the country. This present capacity is 5780 megawatt. It's very small by total standard, total Indian standard, and out of this, but it is coming from 20 reactors. See, although our power generation capacity in the world is less, which are doing better than us, but at the same time, number of reactors wise, we are not very small. That is because when we started our nuclear reactor program, we had very small grid, and smaller grid can tolerate only smaller size of reactor. Otherwise, if that reactor strip, cascade tripping takes place. Those of you whom we have not studied, you can study what is cascade tripping. Then we are likely to go up by in another 3-4 years to about double this capacity. As a matter of fact, government has given us a target of increasing the capacity to 3 times by 2024. That should be possible. And then we are going for new launches, which will take this to about 27,480 megawatt, maybe by again 25 or so, 25, 22. And then 2032, this 48,000 megawatt, I am not very sure, but this will be what will be our target. And it will be having a mix of reactor, One of them is PHWR, which I told you, that will be now 700 megawatt electrical reactor. Fast breeder reactors which we are making, they are about 500 megawatt capacity, maybe 600, and these LWRs will be 1000 megawatt or 1750 megawatt, one of them, depending on where from we are buying it. And these will be foreign reactors. But these reactors will be ours. This I can skip because I have already told. Now this gives a map of where these nuclear reactors are coming up or will come up. So these colored ones are the ones where the reactor has not been made, but the site is being talked about. That includes the Saripur site in West Bengal also. And one more site is being planned somewhere here in Andhra Pradesh. So depending on wherever we are allowed to move and wherever we are able to finalize the contract with the foreign supplier, reactors will come up. But the Indian reactor program, that is PHWR, they are on, and wherever we will make those Indian reactor programs here, this Chutka in MP here, then Bhimpur in MP, another part. So these things will come up earlier. And then let us see where else you need energy. Number one is, as you know, all of you are driving cars. So, and again, the liquid fuel will not be available after some time. And so what will happen? The one of the thing could be that you have this electrical power and then convert it into batteries, the lithium batteries, and that those batteries take care of your car. Or because as it said, enough lithium is not there on the in the world to make so much for our vehicles. So then what is the next option is to go for hydrogen. Let's split water, get hydrogen and water. And of course that hydrogen process is a very clean process. There is, so to make this hydrogen we need a high temperature source, and that will come from the high temperature reactor which we call compact high temperature reactor, CHPR. This is again R&D is going on in PRC. And this reactor will generate high temperature heat and water will be put here, and this iodine sulfide process or copper chlorine process or calcium beryllium process, they will convert this steam into hydrogen and oxygen, which can be hydrogen will of course go in your vehicle, and will get clean driving option. Then there is one more thing, as you are aware that we have made the nuclear submarines, and the submarines are right now in serial production. And as a spin of that we have got this reactor technology for pressurized water reactor. So what we have to do, they are smaller size reactor, we have to scale up, not outdated. Scale up and make it suitable for making the Indian PWR. This shows the sketch of the Indian PWR, and this will be a 900 megawatt reactor. And 900 megawatt. Why normally it should have been 1000? Why it is not? Because we are not able to make Indian turbine in India, which will be able to meet that. Probably 900 will be more possible, likely. And then another thing that is there is particularly for the mechanical engineers and metallurgists. See, reactor pressure vessel is made by, the steel for this is made only by one company in the world. This is Japan Steel Works. Only if you can't get it from them, then you have to make it yourself, which Russia is doing. So we have also started a process that NPCIL and L&T has put up a plant, and there we are hoping to make these forgings for our use. But of course, we are making forgings for the submarine program at HEC Ranchi because they are of smaller scale. Then another question, which is quite often asked, and people tell us that we are not doing nuclear waste management is a problem in nuclear energy. I want to tell you why people say that and what is it we are doing. See, what they do is they don't do reprocessing, and when you don't do reprocessing, they call it open fuel cycle, and whereas we have a concept which is closed fuel cycle. That means closed would mean that we will reprocess, and after reprocessing will get the uranium and plutonium, which will go back to the reactor, and whatever is waste, that will become vitrified and stored in a different mode. That is what I am going to describe to you. But you have to understand and see the number. Out of 100% spent fuel that has come out, only 1% is nuclear waste. Rest of the thing goes back into the reactor. So that means we have, what is of our concern is only this 1% waste. So that is why it is not a problem what is being talked about. And I will tell you, see, towards the end of this part of the presentation, that India is one of the most developed country, or maybe we are number one also, you can call us that, in terms of this reprocessing and waste management technology. So the basic, again, the closed fuel cycle, if I explain, uranium mining, then after the fuel fabrication it goes into thermal reactor, then you do the reprocessing to separate uranium plutonium, it goes into the fuel fabrication plant, and then it goes to the first reactor. Then there is a first reactor fuel cycle reprocessing plant also. From there again fuel fabrication it goes back. So this is what is closed fuel cycle. And then every stage you get nuclear waste, and of course which is a very small fraction, and this is will tell you what you do with this waste. So just see, that means if you are 3-stage program I talked about, every stage you have to have a reprocessing plant, reprocessing technology also. So this is what is the technology. If you come to Kalpakkam, you will be able to see that the Kalpakkam, there is the reactor is operating, which is PHWR. Also we have a reprocessing plant which is taking from there, and there itself it converts into uranium and plutonium, and then it goes back to prototype fast beta reactor. Of course the fabrication is done in Tara. Same way, for fast beta reactor, spent fuel will come out, and this is the facility which is coming up at Kalpakkam, and where we will reprocess and put it back again into the reactor, and additional plutonium will come out, which will be made converted into fuel, and probably some reactor which will come up at Kalpakkam will be putting back them into that. This is what is again post fuel cycle. Nothing goes out. Similarly, HWR, although we have not made the reactor, but as part of our R&D development, we have already made a reprocessing plant, of course a demonstration plant which is operational at Bombay. This we have commissioned last year. So we have total technology in all the areas I talked about. This shows the inside of a reprocessing plant. This one is, I suppose, at Kharagpur. We call it pre-feed 2. Then what happens is, this technology wise, we first do chopping. See, this is the fuel bundle. This is called a gang chopper. This whole thing will be split. All these assemblies, they will be split into some 50 mm long pieces, and then it will put into a dissolver, but the uranium portion or uranium oxide portion will be dissolved, and then the hull will be taken out. The next slide will show that. And then after this dissolution, what we do is uranium and plutonium will be separating, and then we will be doing partitioning. Similarly, waste also will be taken out, and plutonium and uranium will go out. That is, they come out in the form of acid. Then we convert them into oxide. So that both is true both for plutonium and uranium. So this shows inside of a reprocessing plant. Normally you will not get picture of this type outside, because nobody talks about it. And this is the hull, that hull pieces I was talked about. Hull would mean in this case is those zircon-like cladding which I was talking about. Inside this we have already taken out the whatever is there, because both sides are open. We have already dissolved out this uranium oxide. Actually, this plant is basically for the chemical engineers. I don't know how many chemical engineers are here. This is actually marvel for them. And all the things happen by solvent extraction process. Then, as I showed you, this is first reactor fuel cycle facility, which is again coming up at Kharagpur. Then what happens to the waste? Now that question let us answer. this waste comes out in the form of this fission product, acids of this fission product. So high level acid is there, and then we have got a temperature of about 1000 degrees C, and in which we pour that liquid in it, and they form a continuous matrix in this. So this process is known as vitrification. They get vitrified, and then this liquid at 1000 degrees C is poured into these canisters, and we form this a large number of canisters in this, and then it is stored here in this facility, where for about 60 years. What will happen? They will cool down sufficiently and will be ready to go to the repositories, which may be about half a kilometer down the surface of Earth. And here we need, by our design, we need granite. Some people go for clay, but nobody has so far made this repository because that requirement has not come. And we in India feel that this will be required only around 2070 or so. So that is why this is not being done, only research is going on. Now you will see this is a very old slide. It is not an old slide, the photograph was old, and this was taken about 25 years ago when this technology of vitrification we are doing. And the waste that what are being talked about, or which is concerned for so many people, this, for a family of 5, this is the waste that will be generated if they are consuming all the electricity coming from nuclear energy. Only this is the slide. But I have a separate reason for showing this slide. That is today, 25 years ago we are in one place, today's technology has advanced much farther. Today's waste for the same family will be only this part of the range. Let us see what is the technology. And we are leading in the world in this technology. And we have a plant operating already at Tarapur, and something similar has been made at Trombay also. So as I told you, total waste is, after reprocessing, total waste is only 1% of the spent fuel. And out of this 1%, minor actinides is 3%, and fission products is 97%. Fission products has a half-life of 30 years, and minor actinides have a half-life of 10,000 years or more. So you have to store this much longer. Whereas this is, you can keep it for 200 years, 300 years, and then you can forget about it because it will come down to the level of a mine. Radioactivity in the level of a mine. And that is why Professor Ray, why I was asking about concrete building for this 200, 300 years, that's what we are looking into. Where we can store it, or of course store it will be under supervision, but it will generate. Whereas whatever goes inside the repository, there the storage will be there, which we will not bother, only some monitoring will be there. But then we have technology for this also. This is not left as it is. It can be burned in fast reactors. Of course, this fast reactor will be different type than what we are doing, and then burned in accelerated driven system, which again I'll tell you a little more about it later. But what has come out is that we have separated this fission product, particularly cesium, and cesium we have converted into the cesium pencil, that is again vitrified pencil, and this goes into blood irradiator. Now blood irradiator is one component. If you want to have blood which is pure and not having this Rajan, what is that called? What is blood? What is that component which you have to hemoglobin? What is? Okay. So that is what we have to remove, and after you do that, blood can be stored as long as you want to. And this is again, we are first in the world to do it, because other people were doing it with cesium chloride. Cesium chloride is a powder, and there is always a danger of that spreading and spreading, contamination spreading. Actually, see what happens these days, whenever we meet foreigners, particularly developed nations, I'm not talking about or less developed nations, they will always talk about collaboration with us. So this is one area they want to collaborate. So our scenario in atomic energy has changed, and here instead of we talking about collaboration with others, people talk about collaboration with us. And this is one, this plant is operational at Trombay. And then before we end this part, of course we have to tell that what happens to that uranium and plutonium, how it gets converted into fuel. This is a plant at Tarapur, which we call A3F, Advanced Fuel Fabrication Facility. And here you see this, all the work, all the components that will be used for what is the figures at NFC, everything is open. And here everything is inside the glove box. Why? Because the plutonium is toxic, so it cannot be allowed to come out. So they are maintained, all these boxes are maintained at negative pressure, nothing can come out, even if there is a puncture in this whatever gloves, etc. they are using. So they use gloves, through these gloves they are putting hand into the system. And then again these are uranium oxide pellets and the technology is safe. This one is the pins for the prototype fast breeder reactor, and this is made by BRC and supplied to BMPR for criticality, which we expect somewhere in next year, middle of next year. Then this I have probably talked about energy sources for next 500 years or 1000 years. You will see this later. But let me see what is the other thing happening in terms of technology for the rest, for even long term. Long term is infinite period. See, there is one technology which is accelerated defense system we call. That is, we accelerate proton to a very high energy, which is about 1 GeV, and then when it hits a source, hits a target means which is of either mercury or lead bismuth or something like that, and then it will be converting into go through a process of spallation, and every nuclear fission we get about 2.5 neutrons as I told, but in this spallation you get about 30 neutrons. So it is a neutron rich phenomenon, and then what we can do is we can have a subcritical thorium system which can produce energy. So this is one of the long term things, one way of using thorium which will take us to 40,000 years or beyond. I think I have told us. This shows one of the facilities where deuterium uranium fission has taken place. Okay. Then let us go to the ultimate solution of energy. So finally it has to be something like sun which will continue to give energy. Now I do not know, everybody knows that in sun what we are getting is fusion. But you know, if it was pure fusion, then it would have been over in 27 days or something. Sun would have burnt it out itself. So it is not fusion, they call it some weak interaction, weak reaction and all those things. But finally it will, that is why it will continue in the future. So similar thing we are trying to do in the ITER. ITER stands for International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. And this is a French word that means that on the way to solve energy. This is a collaboration of 9 countries. The project cost will be started with 1 lakh crore and now maybe 2 lakh or 3 lakh crore. But all some 9 countries are participating, including the European Union, and India is contributing 9% of that. It's a huge amount, but still we are contributing. But by contributing 9%, we will get the entire technology for all the processes, all the steps. Just to tell you little more about this, that is, this particular ITER, which is a tokamak, it will be giving 500 megawatt thermal average, because it is not a continuous process, it's kind of pulse process, and peak power will be 1194 megawatt thermal. So it is a small reactor, if you say it is thermal energy. And plasma burn time is 100 to 3000 seconds, pulse emission time is 1800. This is not important. But what is there is that this will be burning, this reaction will be happening at 150 million degrees C. That is the temperature of sun. So we have to create sun on the surface of Earth. And it is progressing slow. Probably 2021 is not possible, maybe 2025 or so, that first fusion will be seen. But the point is that once this technology is solved, or once the technology has been established, it will solve the problem for eternity. Because only half a mile cube of seawater has enough of deuterium to take care of the world's energy. You can see think of how many mile cube of water is there in sea. So it is a new solution for eternity. This shows how it looks like, and as a matter of fact, to tell you that what is happening is that you saw our fission reactors, they are the simplest. Next more difficult was the fast breeder reactor, it's much more difficult than that, and obviously this is 10 times more difficult than that. Again, I will not go into this because if you want, I can always pass on the information if you can send me a mail. This shows when I had gone a little later, this is where the tokamak building is coming up, which I was showing over there. And here the main building will be there. But there are some features which will be probably interesting to civil engineers and mechanical engineers. See, this building or this facility is to be designed for 0.70, which we don't do. We talk about 0.1, 0.5 of that type. So how to design for 0.70? It is not a straightforward. So you put it on isolators. These are the isolators that is being talked about. So when I had gone there, these isolators are being erected. On this, the whole thing. And this will reduce this 0.70 to quite a low value. But there is again, if you put isolators, those of you who design this type of system, there will be a lot of movement. And if between two buildings, there will be a movement of 20 centimeters. So all your thing which is getting connected between these two buildings, particularly piping, has to take care of the 27 centimeter movement in all directions for this building. Okay, I had been talking about, I've talked many things. I don't know how much you have believed me, but then I have a moral responsibility to tell you that why do I call this energy great? Let us see, now I am able to convince you, those of you who have not been convinced so far. Let us compare between coal and nuclear. You take the case of a 1000 megawatt electrical plant, operating at 80% capacity factor, one coal power, one nuclear. If it is Indian coal, you will need somewhere around 5 million tons of coal to keep it operational for about 300 days a year. And out of that, waste that will come out, CO2 is 10 million tons, SO2 is 50,000 tons, NO2 is 20,000 tons, and fly ash, million tons. So this is what is the scale in case of a thermal power station. If it is nuclear, this same 5 million tons becomes 160 tons, and waste, in case of all these numbers that we add up, instead of that, only 4 tons of liquefied gas containing about a ton of radiation. That is the difference. Then, I do not know how many of you know this, that it is CO2, you have all of you know that it causes greenhouse gases, global warming, etc. But still, what thing is happening to the sea? Sea is getting acidified, and if you take data from the just after the show, you will get a very high number of the order, very low number of pH value, and as you go into the sea, it will reduce. But what has been calculated or projected at the present rate of CO2 emission, this pH will come down from 8.5 to 8.1. There is a recorded, it is not recorded, it is an inferred history that's about 200 million years ago, some like this, dinosaurs died 65 million years ago because of some probably meteor hit. But here again something like volcano eruption was so much of CO2 release that where this pH went down to below 8, and 90% of the sea life and probably 70-80% of the surface life all were killed. Of course, later on this slowly came back, so it has taken so many million years to again come back to that level. So we are trying to do something like that, generate that vital wave by operating these CO2 based systems. Then take another one, that is what is called a low life cycle greenhouse gas emission. This is CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, that's the table. And see, if it is nuclear, it is about 10. That is, this 10 comes from the fact that you have to make those items which are going into the plant, where you will be producing CO2 to, because you have to put the furnaces and then electric power, etc. All that taken into account. Whereas if you are doing this solar photovoltaic coming from China, then they will be about, this is solar photovoltaic, this is about 60. That means it is six times of nuclear. And of course, if it is coal, this will be, this number is about 1000, so you can calculate the ratio. This is as far as greenhouse gas emission is concerned. I think I have told enough. And whatever data I have told you, if you don't believe, that's the last thing you can do. You can check with internet. I have picked up the numbers from internet. Then other question I must answer is why it is sustainable. Now let us see what sustainability means. That is, if you have opted for the system, it will be you will be able to take care of a system for a long time. So let us see what happens. See, we have about 55 billion tons of coal in India, which is right now exploited. And then another 110 billion, total 110 billion tons of coal is there, which we can take out. Everything may not be possible, but something you will be able to take out. And of course, we have got total of over 200 billion tons of coal, which may not be exploited, or it may not be possible to exploit. So if you take those type of numbers, 55 billion tons of coal will give you something like 10,000 gigawatt year electrical year, which means if you are operating about 400 gigawatt electrical every year, so it will last you for about 25 years. Maybe it will become factor 2 or maybe it will become factor 3. Whereas let us take the case of thermal reactor, nuclear. If it is thermal reactor, this will become about 300 gigawatt electrical in thermal reactor, and the same one will become 40,000 gigawatt electrical if you are going for fast reactor. That means this will be able to take care of for us 100 years. And thorium, but you have another thing, is that light water reactor which is being added, and if that is added, it will be able to take care for us another 2400 gigawatt electrical. That means about 8 times this. So this 100 years can be, maybe we will be able to take care of ourselves for about 800 years. And then of course this comes the thorium. It will at least take care of for us for another 500 years. So I don't see, even with this simple load, even if the ITER type of fusion reactors do not come up, but at least 600, 700 years, we have no energy problem if we are taking the nuclear. That is why I call it sustainable. But I would like to give you one more parameter here. Supposing you want to put up a 10 gigawatt electrical, that is 10,000 megawatt electrical power capacity for your country. So then if you go to take the wind route, you need about 5,000 square kilometers. If you need go for solar, you will need about 4,100 square kilometers. And whereas if you go for nuclear, it is only 2 square. So because it's such big population, even the land is itself is one big issue, and you know how much problem is there in our country to acquire land. Probably today's biggest problem is acquiring land. And of course, nuclear and solar and wind, they have the other problem, that is they are available only for 25% of the time. Solar is available only for 20% of the time, and whereas nuclear is available for 90% of the time. This again, I will give you one more thing, that is, because I am trying to prove my point. What happens is that in last 5-6 years, we didn't add much of nuclear capacity. It's only now we have added this Podotula monastery. And in this, solar has made real impressive from about 7,000 megawatt electrical, they have gone to 70,000, so about 10 times. And we have not done anything. But see the total amount of, sorry, not 70,000, 3,000, 35,000. So 7,000 to 35,000, 5 times increase. And whereas, if you see this in that million units or in number of units of electricity produced, we have, although we have not added any capacity, we are remaining at this level, and solar with all that 5 tons addition, it is still at this level. So this is because of the fact that 20% and 90%. The solar will not be able to solve all the problems. It's not a magic solution. It has to be taken with in a particular combination. Okay. Then in terms of why again sustainability, one is that price. Nuclear power, say Naroda power station, it gives that per unit 2 rupees 49 paisa. And the same other plants in UP, you can see that 4 rupees 29 paisa and this type of number. In Rajasthan, RAPS, even the new plant is giving at 3 rupees 44 paisa, and you can see all others are higher than that. Gujarat, in fact, Katrapar, it is 2 rupees 37 paisa. The coal is nearer. Coal is nearer to this figure, but the new unit it is going to 5. So, nuclear is, even today, it is cheaper. Particularly in a place where you are not putting up the thermal power station on the coal pit. That is away from the coal supply point. And because of the transportation cost, the cost goes up. So in terms of nuclear, large-scale exploitation of nuclear energy is inevitable. Whether I like it or not, it is going to happen. And fossil fuel is going to get exhausted. And after it is exhausted, it will come only power, energy will come only for nuclear and renewable, mostly solar. So, and these some countries like French, there the nuclear and the solar power supply is managed by the same agency. Their Atomic Energy Authority manages their solar energy. That is why, because this is the power of future. That is the way it has been done. Then last part of my presentation, what is likely to happen in future. This again, everybody has his opinion, so I am also having the right to have my opinion. And that opinion, in my opinion, is something like this, that as of today, Indians consume about 1,000 units per year, world average is 2,000 units per year, and developed nation consume about 6,000 units per year. But what happens is, whatever you do now, we may put up 100 gigawatt, 200 gigawatt, our in India is going to remain, see the difference of, that is people in poverty region and also people who are in rich region. That kind of a disparity is going to remain, and that is reflected in terms of the unit consumption. That is 60% of Indians will going to consume less than 100 units per year. So what will happen if you produce a lot of power? They will not take us for it. So my consumption, my assumption is that probably this will be more near to something like 2,000 units per year, and we will need to have a capacity of 500 to 600 gigawatt electrical of installed capacity, and that is taking into account our population will be 1.5 billion by 2050. Because here we are not controlling anything. It is happening whatever is inevitable. So again, what will happen? Next question is that coal will last for us 50 years, and if you have to allow burning coal that long, and you know that last few days you must have been reading papers, now our government is talking about putting up 175 gigawatt electrical of renewables. That is after this, and they see, November you will be hearing much more things because of this Paris Convention which is going to happen on the control of greenhouse gases. Then there is a spelling mistake here. We may get gas hydrate. It is why You know what is gas hydrate? That if you go along our coast, this is the Indian phenomenon, along our coast, for up to at a depth of about 2 kilometers, you get these hydrates which are in the form of solid, that is in the form of ice. This is methane in the form of ice. So there is probably a technology which will come up, and people have started talking about it, which will be taken out quite easily, except that going down to that 2 kilometer depth is the problem. And you will get lot of gas, methane gas. And what is being told is this will be, this is 1500 times our gas, 1500 times of natural gas that we have. So probably it will be able to take care of 100 years for us if we start exploiting. But will we be allowed to exploit? Because the same problem of CO2 and greenhouse gas emission is going to be there. And my own belief is, however we may dislike, this fossil fuel is likely to continue till this century. And people do not agree with my views. People say it will end much earlier, but I am very sure that it will continue. Maybe in a smaller way, but it will continue. So, in the long run, solar and nuclear will remain. And if you want, solar deployment is very easily possible, because you must have read in the newspaper that the government wants to put up 100 gigawatt electrical of solar capacity by 2020. So that is 5 years from now, or 2022. I don't know how it is possible, but it will be possible. But nuclear cannot happen so quickly. You have to plan everything, you have to open your minds, all those things has to go on, and it has to be a long-term planning is required. So this is the basic difference between solar and nuclear. Here you need lot of long-term planning. Here probably you can, if you have money, you can put up this much faster. Of course you have to get land. You have seen that to put up 10 gigawatt electrical, will need about that 400 into 100 gigawatt, 400 into 100, that many square kilometers of land. So that is again somebody has to get that land to make that possible. And again, it's purely my views. We should concentrate on making 2 reactors per year for next 20 years, whatever type of reactor it is. That will take us 40 gigawatt electrical, and then we can step up to 4 reactors, and then maybe 6 reactors after another 20 years. So next 60 years, it is feasible to reach a top capacity of about 200 gigawatt electrical. And then again, nobody agrees with me, but if somebody sits down with me for discussion, I can always explain my point of view. And I am telling this to my DAE colleagues or atomic energy colleagues, that we must concentrate on uranium mining. We must build at least 2 reactors per year and solve the financing issues. Because finally today, financing issues are the most important, because money is not coming, and nuclear power is, to start with, capital investment is much more than any other system. Then, as I have been telling, I have been using the word that in many times over, that we are the best in the world. This again, I do not know whether you agree, but yes, but that much I can tell you with guarantee. How many reactors will come, I cannot tell you, but definitely in terms of technology, we are the best in the world in many areas. And the reason for that is that we have been, from 1974, when the Cochrane explosion takes place, we are denied of everything. We cannot buy anything outside. That atomic energy cannot buy anything outside. Even from Indian company having some collaboration with the foreign company, they will not also give us. So everything we have to do by ourselves. So that means we got into a situation of self-reliance, and whatever we do, we try to bring in the sustainability factor into that, and excel, and of course make our nation stronger, because after all, atomic energy, one of the main purposes is strategic purpose. So we have to make nation stronger, both military-wise as well as economy-wise. And the strength, apart from this particular basic that had come, that we are denied all types of technologies, we are Again, all our expertise is homegrown from 0 to 1. Entire quantity is homegrown. And why that was possible? Because Homi Bhabha, when 1954 our atomic energy is formed, by 1957 his vision was that we should have a training school. And what is the training school? There we take MSc, physics, chemistry, biology, and engineering, most of the common branches, they join there. Then they go through a 1-year training program in nuclear science and engineering, and then they become part of BRC, a part of our atomic energy. And also, we must know that atomic energy's job is probably best in the country, at least best in the government sector, because we are salary-wise, we are better off than all others in government sector. We have a lot of freedom to do whatever we do, and also there are, as a scientist or as an engineer, whatever you would like to do, that is available in our system. And we always get a chance to contribute to science, contribute to nation, contribute to the society. That makes a difference between after you join, this you will not understand today, after you join, and if you have, those of you stay back with us for some time, they will appreciate, and all my senior colleagues who have come from Bombay, they will agree to whatever I am saying. We have also a university, that Homi Bhabha National Institute. It is a deep to university and it is an A-grade university, where all of us, our colleges are part of that university. That is even BRC, BCC, which you know, similarly SINP, Shah Institute, you will know. We are all colleges of this particular university, and we teach them, and this is a postgraduate. Postgraduate means after MSc. All the courses that are taught here is after MSc, and those who join our training school also go through the MTech program, but that is after the 1-year course, and for 1 year they go through this project work and other things they do, and then they get a MTech degree. Okay, I have given my number. If anybody found that anything interesting I have talked about, you can always ask me. And my idea was not to tell you about the technologies, but my idea was only to tell you about the concepts that are there. And obviously nuclear is little complex, that is no doubt about it. And that is why this type of presentation normally should remain at a concept level. I have not gone into, that is why I have not gone in any technical details. And I wish some of the students for next year, to give you an idea, I was just telling Professor Ray that in my batch, in 1974 when I joined BRC Training School, we are about 20 people, we had 20 people from BE College. That time it was BE College. So I don't know why so, and now we have science, physics, chemistry, and also art sciences. So all these, a lot of people can join us. And if you join, I can assure you, you will get a very good job. What is possible in India. Thank you.
So thank you, sir. You have opened up a completely new horizon for the students. So would you permit a few questions from the audience? So we have time, if you permit. Okay, then a couple of questions. question.
very often we read in newspapers that this Indo-US collaboration on nuclear energy that will actually hamper our reprocessing facilities. So our fast breeder program will actually die down. So what is your opinion about that?
This question cannot be answered in one line, but let me try to be as brief as possible. See, this nuclear deal that you have been reading in 2009, that was mostly from our point of view, it was only to get uranium. But you know that these days, as you try to purchase something, it comes with some other things. No? You know, if you take this, you will get this type also. So when we try to take this, we have to take reactors also. And so reactors are, whatever reactors are being talked about from General Electric, Areva or Rosatom, these are all imposed on us, that is to get the clearance, get the ban lifted on us for getting uranium, this is the price we are paying. But what has happened, fortunately or unfortunately, this is not coming through because these reactors are much costlier, or energy produced from these reactors will be much costlier, except the Russian one, compared to our reactors, which are PHWs. So, now this is the main issue. But as of today, the nuclear deal, we have kept fast reactor out of it. So it is not going to hamper our fast reactor program. But reprocessing of the uranium that is coming through that route with the other reactor, or which is coming to foreign country, is another issue, and which I had participated in that negotiation, but it is likely to remain a problem. So that is why my concluding side I say that let us concentrate on mining, getting uranium, Indian uranium.
Any other questions? Sir, may I ask something? Sir, you clubbed solar and nuclear together amongst the energies for the future, but why not wind also?
Yeah, see, you are right, wind and hydro, they are also renewable. But what will happen is that wind and hydro will saturate very quickly. It will not be able to, add 100 gigawatt electrical, big type of thing. Because you saw the amount of land required to do this wind, 5,000 square kilometers per 10,000 megawatt electrical. So, and what I know is that now most of the areas where wind is available for exploitation, that area we have already started work. So further addition to that it will not happen. But solar is unlimited, because solar you can go to all places, even you go to the top of a hill and put up over there. Those things are possible. Whereas this is not possible for the these
Wind farms.
And similarly hydel also. Hydel, when today making hydel, in our northeast a lot of hydel potential is there. But today we will not be able to flood the huge areas that we have to flood for this one. Not possible.
Thank you.
Medicines in your part.
Okay. In the morning we had a long session probably on that. And see, we are again, we are doing quite well, and we have Dr. Rajan here, who is, maybe you can talk to him after the lecture. And also we are trying to put up something in Calcutta also, so the nuclear medicine is exploited in a bigger way. But what I would like to add is, see, power, compared to power, this application of nuclear medicine is much more than power, total as economy. So, nuclear medicine has to move faster and it has to be made available. And I do not know, it's not good to tell in the front of the children, that the statistics says that everybody, 1/3 of the population after 65 is going to die out of cancer. If so, that means nuclear medicine has to be there in a big way for the Indian population.
Because energy and its use has created cancer in big ways. Thinking from coal, the first chimneys, they created,
I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
they are causing cancer.
No, I am not able.
Energy in a big, hazardous way, will lead to not only artificial industrial education, also national education of this impact.
See, I have two answers to your question. That is, number one is I do not know the answer to your question. Second is that even if I do not agree also. Hydrogen fuel, sir, as I told you, na, that hydrogen fuel we have to make, and it has to come in a big way. If you have to replace this liquid fuel and gaseous fuel for these mobile applications, that is for vehicles. So hydrogen fuel will come, hydrogen fuel has to be split, and that is the only solution of tomorrow. No, but this, if you think of the volume, I am not remembering the number exactly, but it is a very small quantity of water compared to what is available in sea. Of course, you may have to desalinate, no doubt.
Sir, what is the scope of nuclear energy for earth science students?
See, I can answer this question in terms of geologist. Okay. Geologist and earth science, is it same or it is same, no? So we take about 10 students. Last year, this year also we have taken 10 students because BRC conducts all those interviews and take these students. 10 students from geology side and another 10 students from geophysics side who are joining our atomic minerals division. So there is a good scope, I can. A number-wise, 10 number may not be large, but it is you can get good job. Some of them are field jobs, some of them are research jobs, but there is scope.
Sir, you said we have to go for nuclear energy, but what are the scope of we have thought about disaster management if anything happen in future?
Okay, see, no, I'll answer. This is, see, disaster. If you see, nuclear energy is there for last about 60 years now, and disaster, you have to define disaster. Now, the first big accident happened was 3 Mile Island. Nobody died because of that. Then it happened in Chernobyl. Some 34 people died. Those were firefighters. And then Fukushima, that's the biggest event that happened later. But nobody died. So, what, and if a bus turns upside down, which happens every other day, so there many more people die. So it is not a disaster in that sense. Disaster in nuclear is in mind. See, after this Fukushima, that evacuation that has taken place, that has caused all the damage that is possible. If they would have, World Health Organization has concluded, if the evacuation was not done, Fukushima would not have been a bigger problem. So big a problem for the human beings who are associated with it. Whereas yes, there it has, radioactivity has come out, it has spread, all those things. But at this level of radioactivity, after this it gets diluted, probably it's not at that level that you can talk about. And then lastly, now let us talk in terms of Indian context. India, there is so far, thank God, or thanks all our staff members who work for it, we have not come anywhere close to anything like that. So I expect that if we are able to maintain a good culture, we will remain disaster free. And lastly, our future designs will be such that this disaster is not possible. There is no radioactivity can be released.
Okay, thank you. Now, as a token of our love and regard, we would like to hand over a memento to Dr. Basu. The vote of thanks will be given by Professor Anirban Gupta, Associate Dean, Alumni Affairs and External Relations, and convener of the Institute Lecture Series.
Thank you. We are indeed grateful to Dr. Shekhar Basu, Padma Shri Shekhar Basu, for the lucid and authentic lecture that we had for last more than 1 hour. all of us here in this hall, I think, also inspired to know the state-of-the-art advanced level technology that BARC is working with, and also about knowing about their self-reliance. It is indeed a matter of pride for any technologies or scientists sitting over in this room. And he mentioned, or he tried to get a conviction within us that how green and sustainable the technology is. He mentioned about the climate change conference or summit going to held in Paris next month, where Government of India has already declared a nationally determined contribution. India has proposed that it will be cutting down the greenhouse gas or climate change causing gases by 30% compared to 2005 level. After this lecture, I think it is a good option, a green option, not only for the renewable energy sources. Nuclear energy is not a renewable source theoretically as such, but it has been mentioned and nicely shown that it's a very, very green option and also very appropriate for Indian situation. So to achieve the goal, which is Indian government target and an inspiring target for all the countries to follow, 30% cut, I think that's another dimension of this lecture, very, very relevant in today's context. This month only Government of India declared that, next month it will be decided and will inspire other countries to follow. So we are indeed grateful. Morning also we had a chance to hear to Padma Shri Dr. Shekhar Basu, and today in the packed audience we are again mesmerized to hear the lucid lecture that he provided, and also an additional bonus, he got a lot of ideas about the career prospect, the kind of work that we all can undertake with participation of BARC. Thank you very much on behalf of IIST. I also thank our Honorable Director, Professor Ajay Kumar Ray, whose inspiration has initiated this series of Institute lecture. I again thank all of you in the audience and who helped us to organize this event. Thank you very much.
Please note, faculty members, that there is an interaction program with the Director of BARC in the conference hall of the 7th floor of this building.